Hello and welcome to the walk-off, everybody. We have a very special episode for you today. On a Blue Jays off day, we're going to dive into everything about this team. I've got a very special guest with me today. So excited to have him back on the show. If you are new to the channel or have not hit that subscribe button, well, please do so. It goes a long way, as well as the like. You've heard it from all the kids on YouTube and now from an old man. So please get on board with that. On that, so thrilled to have returning to the show a Blue Jays analyst extraordinaire. You can check out his Bat Flip newsletter on Substack and listen to his podcast, Blue Jays Happy Hour, wherever you get your pods. Andrew Shoeten, welcome back to the walk-off, buddy.
Thank you so much for having me back. Glad to be here.
Man, we had literal shockwaves rolling through Major League Baseball yesterday. Of course, we're going to talk Blue Jays, but I would be remiss to not start with this. The Boston Red Sox moving on from Rafael Devers, shipping him over to the San Francisco Giants for Jordan Hicks. And basically it felt like, hey, you take this $300 million and he's yours. I know there's a little bit more to it than that. What was your first thought when you saw that their superstar, there's so few guys with this sort of contract? He's one of like five or six. So to watch him move to the NL away from the AL East, obviously as Jays fans, that's exciting. But as a Red Sox fan, you've got to have so many questions if you're in that camp. What was your initial thought?
Yeah, it was honestly I hate it because it's making me feel bad for Red Sox fans, which is not a place I like to be. But it is. I mean, you invest so much passion into a guy like that and into your team, and it's just so deeply cynical. And apparently, the relationship was a tough one. He was signed by a different regime. Craig Breslow wasn't Breslow's guy.
Mm-hmm.
But it's to make that commitment to a team and to a city. And then to have them just say it doesn't matter. We're throwing you away. It's ridiculous to me. I don't, I'm sure an older version of me even. I'm sure the Moneyball types will be like, well, that contract is not looking so good, and they're saving money. They can reinvest in other places. They got some guys. They got some warm bodies. It doesn't make their team better right now. And if I don't think that they need to save that money to continue to spend on guys. That's a huge fallacy. And
The timing was weird too. Like
yeah,
they'd won
yeah.
8 of their last 10. It felt like they were coming along. Alex Bregman is getting closer and closer to a return.
Mhm.
Like this does feel like this team is far worse than they were 24 hours ago.
It does, and I feel bad for Red Sox fans, which is just an awful sense to have.
Yeah.
But there are so many. I'm seeing tweets out there like that precede doom, those kind of things, where people were just like, man, starting really feeling the Red Sox, and trying not to curse the team by being excited and finally thinking that, okay, there's a breakthrough coming here. They've been playing really well. Only to have it just blow up in their faces for what, really.
Hmm.
And obviously there was some contentious stuff going on with the position thing. They signed a third baseman. He wants to play third base. He doesn't want to play first. He doesn't like being a DH. That's going to be an issue in San Francisco, regardless. They got a third baseman, but there should have been a way to work it out without this happening to the fans, to the fan base. Cool for Giants fans. The NL West is an interesting division. You can put it that way. I'm pleased for him to no longer be in the American League East, but it's just that sucks, right? It's like if your opposing fans are thinking, wow, this is a great deal for us. You probably didn't do great in the trade, and it's just these people, like every MLB owner, there's so much money. The
Hmm.
Boston Red Sox generate so much money to have framed it that way, and clearly like just basically a salary dump. Like even with the other stuff going on,
Yeah.
I think that you can't look at it any other way, and I think that you have to think that there could have been more done to repair the relationship. I also thought it was interesting. Somebody, I forget who, tweeted that the Blue Jays were one of the few
Yeah.
teams that inquired on him, which is another weird place to be. Is the Blue Jays are a team that seems really willing to spend money, and
Hmm.
after the previous 20 years, that's still tough to really wrap your head around. But adding the being having some sort of willingness. I don't, we don't know any of the parameters going on, or whether they were trying to get Boston to eat money, or how serious anything was, but just even the willingness to inquire on a guy making that much money and with that much still left on his deal speaks to this new mindset of the Blue Jays, which is something that I always make a point of saying is kind of been forced upon them by MLB. They changed the way that revenue sharing worked a couple CBAs ago and grandfathered out team. It used to be that you told them what you made, and they decide, and then based on that you were a revenue sharing team or not. Like you received money for them from that or not. But now they do it based on market size, and Toronto will never not be, it's market size and TVs, the
Hmm.
households that get your TV. So Toronto will never not be a big market again, which has cut them off of the revenue sharing payments, which is something that they really did rely on in, the early 2000s, in the aughts, I guess we call them, and have had to sort of change their business model to a degree that way. I think that that's part of why we look at them as a big spending team now, and why we're seeing some of the stuff that they're doing is because they can't just they have to operate differently. Nevertheless, credit to them for what they're doing and for being interested in a move like this. That would
True.
have been a great move for
Very
them.
true. And you know what? Like the Padres and the Braves were the other, and again, fair size market teams
Mhm.
inquiring about Devers. It just feels like had they waited till the winter, they could have gotten more of a haul for Rafael Devers. Truly
Yeah.
one of the best hitters in all of baseball.
You think that, but then also the way a lot of front offices think is that
Yeah.
that contract's bad. They don't, not a lot of teams are out there signing those deals. Yeah, I don't know. Like you say, there were other suitors. I couldn't have imagined him going to the AL East. I think that the penalty the Blue Jays would have had to pay would have been very high.
Yeah.
Shipping him out to San Francisco is a good move for all involved through the lens of the ridiculous move that they've made. But yeah, it's I think they could have waited, absolutely. I think it just sucks to see, to take the wind out of the sails of a fan base that hasn't. Again, I have no love for Red Sox fans.
Yeah. I'm
They're
with you.
they're
But
just people, I guess. But
yeah.
nevertheless, I don't care for this. I don't want to see them have success. I don't like John Farrell going there and just winning the World Series with a bad team.
Yeah.
The curse is long broken. I don't have to feel sympathy for that. And they're a little too successful over the last 10-15 years. But still, no fan base deserves that. And it is funnier when it's the Red Sox and not, say, a really, the Pirates fans or the Oakland
Yes.
fans or whatever. I can still laugh about this and not feel just rage about the Red Sox ownership and what they've done here in the front office. But
Those
still.
sales could even deplete more. I mean, it is interesting to
Mhm.
look what's going on with Alex Bregman, and he has
Mhm.
having literally a career year. We'll see how he comes
Yeah.
back off of injury here, but he has an opt out after this year, and nobody's really
That's
talking
right.
about that. But if you signed on with the Red Sox, knowing that the cornerstone is Rafael Devers, and then you I like unless that there's more that we just don't know, right? Like who
Mhm.
knows? This is all hearsay, and maybe there's some sort of world where the Red Sox are freeing up money for Kyle Tucker, and Bregman's going to help his old friend get back. Like who knows how
Yeah.
this all plays out, but it could get really ugly in Boston, and I'd be fine with it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think they could have afforded Tucker and kept Devers, but also, there are rumblings. Maybe he asked for a trade out of there. Maybe
Hmm.
that there was some impetus on his end as well. Um, but they didn't have to do that. They didn't have to honor that request, and they certainly didn't have to do it for this package of players either. So yeah, a weird situation, and all the more reason for the Blue Jays to be, aggressive in the trade market and try to take advantage, because this was a team, the Red Sox are nipping at their heels and they're playing really well, and projected better than the Jays, I think, most of the preseason projections. And uh, I don't think that this ruins their seasons. They may still have a fine season going forward without Devers, but it's a blow to a team that was really, competing with the Jays, or the Jays were competing with. So yeah, I think you will have to take advantage. You have to think about it, I think, in that way too, which is exciting as a Jays fan, which just means that, we always like we talked about, I think, for years when the new playoff system was implemented, they're adding playoff teams. It's like, well, our team's going to be as aggressive as they used to about, getting that top playoff spot. And there's just so much of a mushy middle that a lot of teams might lose the aggressiveness in terms of like really going for the trade deadline. And just to have less of that mushy middle, and more of an opportunity for them to really push, I think is hopefully going to mean good things for them going forward in terms of, what they'll do at the deadline, which they should have been doing anyway. I think, I don't know that it changes it that much, but it's, there's one less contender in the American League theoretically, or
True,
at least
true.
one's taken a real huge blow. Yeah.
And the American League has been really interesting this year. Andrew, I want to hear your broad strokes feelings on the Blue Jays right now. I know that they were really hot. They were 12-2 in their last 14. I think it was 30 out of their last 32 games had won 22 and 10 or something like that. Like they were really hot before getting swept by Philadelphia. Even now they're 4.5 out of the division. They're only one back of Tampa for the number one wild card spot. When you just look at this 2025 Jays teams, what's your impressions of it? Is this a playoff team? Does it feel like that?
I think so, but it also feels like the best is yet to come, right? Which is weird for, how good they've been and how, above their projections I think they've played so far. They've gotten those contributions, so many contributions up and down the lineup, but they really haven't they obviously haven't got a ton out of Santander. Max Scherzer, giving them 3 innings or whatever it was so far.
Yeah.
Vlad and Bo aren't really being, their best selves. So even though, they're playing above their heads, I think, and the Philly series was maybe a bit of a reality check in that regard. They've banked a bunch of wins, and they have a platform to, like, they have a reason to be out being aggressive, like I say, on the
Hmm.
trade market. They have guys who we know are going to be better, or we're pretty sure are going to be better, and are going to help them. And there's some, they've been going at it with like 3 starting pitchers basically for the last little while, and through this run, which has been remarkable stuff. We're seeing some cracks in the bullpen, but they're, with when you consider the totality of the roster, when you consider, Jimmy Garcia's coming back, like Scherzer, Adam Macko is now pitching again, and
Hmm.
there's Alek Manoah, where the August is a long way away still, but less far away than it was a couple months ago. There are some solutions to the internal problems that are going to crop up as the Miles Straws of the world stop being able to, carry you on a regular basis, which is
So are
kind
you
of
saying
what's
Tyler
going to happen.
Heineman's not going to hit 400 the whole season?
Yeah, I mean, good on him. That has been
Right?
ridiculous. I mean, just BABIP to death. Just absolutely killing pitchers with little bloops and things
Yeah.
that shouldn't get through. But hey, good for him. Credit to whoever has been pushing for him. The Blue Jays obviously really like him. I'm sure they don't expect this, but like on the defensive side of the ball too, like his, if you look at his per like plate appearance WAR numbers, it's he's like a 15 win player so far. If you prorate it out, we don't do this anymore. They used to do like WAR 600, where they'd be like, okay, we'll prorate it per plate appearance, and what if he played a full 600 season or 600 plate appearance season? I think he'd be like a 15 WAR guy. Like
Yeah.
it's absolutely crazy. But no, there are some things I think about that though too. Like, the way that they've handled lefties, like their balance in the lineup is good. Ernie Clement is obviously absolutely killing lefties. That might regress a little bit, obviously. But like you feel good about that. You feel good about, they have some left-handed batters now who can come in and play that sort of heavy side of the platoons.
It only
Uh,
took them 5 years, too.
it really did. It really, well, yeah, and maybe Teoscar wasn't the one to get rid of. But yeah, it feels like a pretty balanced lineup, and the pitching I think is, enough is there as long as the big three keep doing what they're doing, even though they're a bit of a wobble here over the weekend against Phillies, and
Yeah.
Scherzer comes back and some other options become available. I still like the bullpen. I mean, the Hoffman home run thing is kind of annoying. I don't think that that's, his nature. I think a lot of those have been on well-located pitches, and shouldn't have necessarily been home runs, and it's just a bit of a fluky thing. But it's hard to, it's such a confidence affected role, and or even just as a fan watching, you would like to have April Jeff Hoffman back where it just felt automatic. But there are some good relievers here. They've seen, Brendan Little and Mason Fluharty have been really good coming up out of the bullpen. Yariel Rodriguez turned
Yariel
into
looks
a
great.
like unbelievable. Like these are the kind of wins and on like, in terms of individual player stories that they've been waiting for. Speaking of for 5 years, they just
Truly.
it doesn't feel like they've ever had those. And George Springer having a turnaround too has been a ridiculous thing and so helpful. And so like a lot of those gains, a lot of those wins feel pretty real. Like I don't think Little is going anywhere. I think Springer doing what he's doing, even though maybe not to this extent. I think that's the play that he should have been making a long time ago, which is, don't be such a an all fields complete hitter kind of guy who wants to cut down and strike, swing and miss a bit, but hit the ball over the wall more than 16 times a year. And I think that that should he is such an elite talent, and we saw it earlier in his Blue Jays career, and we saw it in Houston. That he has something to offer even at his advanced age, and it was tough watching the last couple of years, especially because they needed him to, they needed to rely on him. Alejandro Kirk is another guy where obviously we're seeing the best version of him, but as that kind of drops off, there's more to come from Vlad. There has to be. Santander can have a bad year, is not is he is what he is. I think even I think his on base last year was like 324 or something like that. It's pretty hollow outside of the power, but he will come and knock the ball over the wall a bunch of times, and hopefully there'll be someone on base in front of him, and that can be really meaningful and really game changing, obviously. In a way that it's just harder, as we've seen over the last couple of years in particular. It's just so hard this day and age to string hits and walks together and get guys, push them across that way and manufacture runs. Like you need the big inning, you need the ball going over the wall. And like I say, I just don't think we've seen the best of this offense, which is really probably, everything else is pretty average and pretty, slightly above average. And the offense is going to make or break them. And it feels like they've hit on a balance of, contributors without, that should be durable as they get, guys going better in terms of the top of the lineup.
That's a great way of putting it too. It does feel like there's more in the tank because we haven't seen Vladdy at his best. We haven't seen Bo at his best. And you know what? Bichette's been great.
Mm-hmm.
He's definitely proven that he is out of whatever funk he was in last year with the injuries and just being in an obvious slump. But neither of them have been those like 900 to 1,000 OPS guys for an extended period of
Yeah.
time, and they both have that in them. If anything, that's really something we can hang our hat on is the fact that we are seeing contributions from people you wouldn't expect. And I know you touched on a few, but I mean, for the first time in years, we're watching some of these 25 to 27-year-old prospects really kind of finding their game. I know Addison
Mm-hmm.
Barger is sort of at the forefront of that, but even Alan Roden and his recall has been much better than obviously he was in his debut. We just watched Will Robertson get called up. They've got some of these mature, we'll call them prospects, with some real thump in their bat. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I'm not expecting Will Robertson to just come in and be the be all end all, although he has some interesting stuff going on in his swing
Absolutely.
where we've watched him increase his exit velo, we've watched him increase his launch angle. He's hitting bombs in AAA. Alan Roden, kind of the same thing. Addison Barger's an interesting character to me. Do you think the Blue Jays have found their third baseman moving forward, or even if not third base? Is Addison Barger a Blue Jay long term? Like, do you think that they found a bat in that for that 5-6 hole that they've been lacking?
I kind of think so. Yeah, it still feels early to say, even
Yeah.
though, like you say, of course, he's a mature, more of a mature prospect. I think he's a little younger than he's not 27 yet. I don't think,
No,
if I
he's
recall off the
25. Yeah.
yeah. So that's a little more normal. But yeah, I mean, just the tools are so loud. Like the arm in the outfield or at third base, really works. The defensive metrics like him. And just having him, the power is obvious, or the bat speed is obvious, the ability to generate exit velocity. And it was all really just about like, can he not strike out 40% of the time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And even though he doesn't really have huge home run seasons in the minors, it feels like they've really hit on something with him, and he's seeing the ball well. And there will be ups and downs. I wouldn't have been opposed to putting Devers at third base and
No.
using Gardner a little more sparingly, or using him in the outfield more. I think he's fine there, more than fine probably. But yeah, I think that it, it may not just be like he's going to lock down third base, but I think he should be here for a long time. I think that's the kind of bat that you can get excited about because of the bat speed, because of the exit velocity that he generates. And I think that's kind of what Will Robertson, his Baseball America just wrote about him and some of the underlying under the hood stuff
Hmm.
with his. I mean, he like ripped a couple of foul balls on
Yeah.
Sunday as well. Like you could see instantly. Okay, there's something there, and the BI piece was talking about, the swing decision metrics that they were using are really upticking as well for him, which that's exciting stuff. And the Blue Jays haven't really had that, even though they're not, it's not like a guy they picked first overall and you're watching them all the
Hmm.
way up. There's this Blue Jays fans know very well that from Jose Bautista forward, that there are guys who can be late bloomers and can click and can, dismiss them at your as could be a folly. I remember banging the drum for trading Jose Bautista in his 50 home run season before that contract
Yeah.
extension and being like, what the heck are they doing? They're really gambling on a guy. But if you're seeing what we're seeing in the underlying stuff, and I think a guy like Robertson and like Barger, and I think Roden is to an extent like a Statcast, not a darling
No.
in the same way, but he hits the ball hard as well, and that's not the be all end all. You can obviously make it work in a number of different ways, but yeah, that's the kind of stuff that should get people excited. It's excited, especially because this team doesn't need guys to hit doubles and to slap singles the other way, as much as they seem to sometimes want those types.
Yes.
I would like to see the ball go over the fence, and generating incredible exit velocity gives you the best chance to do that more often, right? So,
And it's been kind of refreshing to see too, Andrew, because I know that like in my opinion anyways, the biggest knock on this front office over the last 10 years, more than anything, has been player development. And
mhm,
to watch them sort of take steps forward this year in that, we're watching their farm system move up the ranks. We're watching some guys get graduated to the big leagues and actually succeed
mhm,
and fill in some areas of need. We don't always need to go out and pay a premium for a glove first a glove first
yeah.
guy, which is something that, the fan base gets frustrated with, obviously. So I want to talk this front office real quick here because
Mhm,
I get such a kick out of people online because so I'm probably going to get roasted on both sides of this, but I'm just going to say my opinion on this front office, all right? I really don't think this front office is a bunch of geniuses, and I also think that they're not a bunch of idiots. Like
mhm,
I I really do think that they have failed in major ways over their tenure, and I also think that they have put a pretty decent team on the field in 2025. I don't think that these need to be mutually exclusive things,
mhm.
and we can obviously, if we wanted to, I know we could, Andrew, we could sit here and pick this front office apart. There's lots of threads to pull in that. There's also lots of examples of things that they have done well and maybe have gone against the grain when it comes to the fan base and have worked out. I mean, we were just talking Miles Straw.
Yeah.
To watch this player development move forward, as someone who I make my living as a stand-up comedian, and maybe it took me a little longer than some guys it would take. Okay. Like
Mhm, mhm.
everyone kind of develops at their own pace, and I'm not pro Shapiro or Atkins. I'm not.
Right.
But I also have seen enough baseball where, you know what? And I hate to sound like Mark Shapiro here, but consistency in that core of the front office maybe is an advantage right now. And maybe they are learning some things and starting to adjust. And I know even when Chris Bassett was talking at the beginning of the season, some of the things he said kind of stood out to me about like they're on the right path now and that they readjusted and that they listened to what the players were after and kind of melded their two worlds together. Where are you at on this front office? I'm curious as to just what your thoughts are on Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro right now as we sit here, middle of June 2025.
I mean, I'm kind of where you are on that. I have written many times, I would entirely be fine if Atkins was gone. Feeling a little bit better about him lately than not. I think you're right that they praise stability in the front office, and uh, that's not the same as like being completely inflexible. And if they're like
Hmm.
the stability with the ability to change course, they really looked into what was causing all the pitching injuries. They clearly are doing different things, sort of from a philosophical level, in terms of the hitting, at least a little bit at the big league level. Getting George Springer buy-in, like we were talking about before, on being more of a leaning into his power and that kind of stuff. Feels like that's been a bit of a change. I hesitate to put too much into that because I didn't put a ton into the previous thing. And I think people get nuts about Don Mattingly, which is very weird.
Yes.
I think because of a couple things he's said that were misinterpreted, about being like, oh, that's how we have to win games, is by winning 3-2 or something like that. And people think that that means he doesn't like power, which is not true. But it does feel like some of the all field stuff, some of the opposite field stuff is starting to go away, or at least especially for guys who, maybe that isn't their natural game. And I think they're leaning into, what guys' natural talent is. Like you said, like seeing Will Robertson come up, or seeing Barger, get to be unleashed in this way, where it's like, yeah, no, pull the ball in the air. That's fine. Please do that.
Yeah.
It's very good. And like you're right. Like, I mean, it's weird to be looking at, speaking of Baseball America, I think like last week they wrote a piece about, the Blue Jays farm system is rising on the pitching side. And,
Yeah.
you're seeing some really interesting guys who are, I mean, like Gesevich is up at Double A now, and the guys in Vancouver are really interesting. They've got some guys, Johnny King's in the complex league, and
Yeah.
like it's been a while. It hasn't been as long as maybe it feels. We were dreaming on Ricky Tiedemann, but like there have been some drafts in there that you look at the results so far and you don't feel good about it. Brandon Barrera has been a bit of a disaster as a
Hmm.
pick that high. Some of your Tucker Tomans and your K Dowd, those guys are coming along a little bit as well, but it does feel like they've corrected. And I understand the fans' impetus to be like, well, this isn't working. These guys can't do it. And this I
And
get
10 years is a long time. Like
it is a
they're
very long
right.
time.
Like,
But
yeah.
also, just because they haven't done it yet doesn't mean they can't do a thing.
Yes.
Which is, after 10 years, you start the clock's been ticking for a while, to put together a better team. And I know people will look at the payroll, and be like,
Which
we
is
have to have a
fair,
better team than
right?
this, which
Like,
I think,
yeah.
yeah, absolutely. But the ability to spend a lot of that spending is also, I think, in service of papering over some of the developmental problems that they've had. They just haven't turned out cheap starting pitchers. That would be that would have made such a difference over the last few years if they
Yes, it
had
would have.
been able, as much as we love Chris Bassett or Kevin Gausman or Jose Barrios, you would probably still pay for guys like that. But if you could have had a couple of cheap quality starters making the league minimum for a few years,
Goes a
then
long way.
you could reallocate that money, and you could have had some, could have paid for more power than they've had over the last couple of years. So they're obviously, yeah, there have been high profile misses. There's been a lot that hasn't been good. And it's easy to say, following a run like that I'm okay with them. But yeah, I think they're fine. I wouldn't shed tears if Atkins went away soon. But I
Yes.
do think that there's some value in the stability. Shapiro's contract's up first. That's going to be interesting. I wrote kind of I wrote it in an offhand way in a piece like earlier this month, or late last month, that maybe his job is done. Maybe his job was to just basically to be airlifted into here to create another major market team, a team that really is willing to spend to get the renovation done. And that's kind of maybe what the commissioner's office and the powers that be would have preferred, to try to make Toronto look more like a major league team, or more like a big market team, and behave more
Hmm.
like that. Maybe that's all he was here to do anyway. So maybe it's time for him to get bumped up to commissioner's status, or something like that.
Yeah.
Because I mean, on the non-baseball side of things, a lot has really been accomplished, right? And there aren't a lot of goals to check off after this point. They got the player development complex, they got the renovation done. On the business side, it's kind of, set it and forget it at this point a little bit. I mean, I'm sure Mark Shapiro would disagree with that, and there are still things to do, but it does feel like now it's just about getting the baseball operations side in order, and it feels like they've made some progress in that regard. And I don't know that it is always as much as it's easy for fans to say, you know, rip the Band-Aid off, get rid of these guys, flush everything down the toilet. That, I think if you are able to see where you've gone wrong and not double down on it, and you try to make the changes, then I'm okay with a long-term project like that where there is that lack, there isn't inflexibility about, well, we have to do it this way. That would be one thing, I think. So it's again, I don't want to come off as too pro regime here because
Yeah.
obviously it's not great. The fact that we're like, wow, they're 4 games over 500 or whatever it was, and we're like, wow, this is what a success this is. That's probably a bit much, but you do feel like there's better things coming. You feel great about their ability to spend and the fact that they got the Vlad deal done, and
Hmm.
the idea is very clearly to be competitive going forward. All these things where you like the worries that 10 years ago, 15 years ago would have been huge. It's like, well, if Vlad goes, then this whole thing is we're rebuilding it again, and I don't think anybody wants to be in that place, and I think they will. Give them more time, and they'll probably put together a pretty good team. But that doesn't mean that they're the best people for the job, or that anybody else couldn't do it, or do it better. But sometimes the grass it's always greener on the other side. People have been salivating since the day they arrived to get rid of these guys. So that
Yeah.
also kind of makes me, feel a little bit of solidarity with them, because they've had to deal with a lot of garbage, and have not always done it well. But
No,
in
they have
general,
not.
I do think that they probably have had a bit of an unfit ride, which feels insane to say about a team that has 0 playoff wins in like 10 years. But
Yeah.
I don't think that it's a matter of the industry has passed them by or they don't know what they're doing. I think it's just it hasn't worked as well as it should yet, and they're probably they're I think it's in them to do it. And it might not be in the next people, if for everybody who's so eager to get rid of these guys.
You never know, and that's the thing
Yeah.
with the front office too, right? Is that even if they've done it before, it doesn't mean they're going to do it again, right? You can go out and get
Mhm.
a guy who won and bring him in, and the circumstances change, everything's a little different, and you just can never quite calibrate that to where you want it again. Well, we're talking things that drive my listeners crazy when I say, but I want to talk Andre Gimenez with you real quick.
Okay.
Because I like him. This a lot of people can't handle the fact that I like him, but I really do think that he's a good player. I even think the 15 million AAV is going to wind up being fine. I don't think he's going to be a bargain. Like I don't think anyone's going to be like, "Wow, we really took Cleveland for a ride there." But is he going to be a stalwart defensive player that maybe has more in the bat than we've seen and can really bridge the gap between if Bo leaves, our big hot shot #1 prospect Arjun Amala, can he be that guy to bridge that gap and be pretty solid? I think he can, but I'm curious your thoughts on him, where he fits long term with this organization, and just the trade in general. Moving Spencer Horowitz, I know I still have people being like they gave up too much, which is just like I can't really wrap my head around. I mean, I like Spencer, but kind of a position was blocked there for him.
Mhm.
Where were you at on that, on Jimenez being brought in, and now that he's healthy and we are seeing him produce a little bit better at the bottom end of that lineup, where do you think he fits in with this team?
Yeah, you got it. I think he fits in at shortstop after Bo Bichette probably leaves, right? I mean, I think that the you can only have so much defensive value at second base. He does a great job of that. Ernie
Hmm.
Clement's very good. I've seen people writing about, oh, they had the guy. Ernie Clement has like a sub 50 WRC plus against right-handed pitching. Like let's not go there on that, I think. But he does play elite defense. He's very good. Love Ernie. No
Yeah.
shade to Ernie here. But yeah, I think Jimenez as a switch hitter really helps in that regard in terms of not having that huge platoon split. And I think that when you move him to shortstop, which is probably, yeah, not necessarily set in stone as yet. They certainly looked at different options at shortstop over the years. There's nobody's saying that Bo won't come back for sure
Hmm.
as yet. Some people are, but they don't know anything.
Yeah.
I don't think. I think that the Jays will still be in that conversation, though. Like to have him as a shortstop is, especially. the way that their mindset in recent years has been so defense focused that maybe that's not as great a fit. And obviously for for many reasons, or for the reason that he's such an important piece of the team, and steaming towards free agency and keeping him happy is probably an important thing. And not moving him off the shortstop. They probably should have done it when Marcus Semien was here in 2021, but nevertheless, he's been better in that regard as well. But I think Gimenez will be an upgrade defensively at shortstop. I think the bat will look a little bit better if you have him there. I think you'll be
Hmm.
able to add more offense in terms of your second baseman. And it will probably work out, in a more balanced way for them going forward. So I'm fine with that. I'm with you with that. I don't. It sucks to be like, well, it'll probably be fine to pay him that much. But yeah,
This conversation reminds me of the line from from the Simpsons. A centrist, get him! Like,
I mean,
really
yeah,
riding the fence here, both of us.
a little bit, but I like I think his defense will translate to shortstop well. I think he will. I think he'll be a good piece going forward. And having that, they haven't extended Varsho, so the clock's ticking there. But having defense like that up the middle, in terms of Kirk and Jimenez and Varsho, like that's pretty important. I think that's really, if you're going to have great defense, that's you want that spine. I think that's probably part of where they're at and why they're okay with trading some offense to have a player like that there. And the money is a bit much. Horwitz, I'm with you as well. Like I couldn't care less. No offense to any Horwitz heads out there. Nice hitter. I think the numbers that he put up in the big leagues are probably
They probably
a little
sold him while he was at
inflated.
his highest. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And hey, wish him wish him
Yeah,
well, wish him
for
the best.
sure.
Like absolutely no animosity, but not a guy. Where is he playing on this team right now? Even like it wasn't going to be at second base. And yeah, there's been a lot of days Santander and Springer, and there's guys to have DH, and I don't know that he would have necessarily been the right fit. So that criticism of the deal doesn't really affect me in the slightest. But yeah, it is a lot of money for a guy who you'd look at and feel like, oh, this has been their problem for years, or for at least a couple of years, which is that they've traded too much offense for defense.
Hmm.
As long as they can fill in around him, if Addison Barger is a real thing at third base, it makes those kind of stories make that deal feel so much better. It's when he's hitting fourth on opening day, you're kind of like, I don't know if
Yeah.
they've got the lesson learned yet. But I think that what we've seen since then, it shows that they probably have, and it'll probably be all right.
So, Andrew, if there is any cracks in this Blue Jays veneer, it probably does come from the starting pitching. And I say this with much love for Chris Bassett, Kevin Gausman, and Jose Barrios, who honestly, without those three, where would this team be over the last few years? Just innings pitched, the consistency that they put up every single day, it really is impressive. But I am curious if you think, does the ceiling for this pitching staff need to be higher? And I think that Chris Bassett and Gauze and Barrios, they're enough to get this team into the wild card, maybe even slightly compete for the division. Even that might be a little bit trickier. Do you think to win playoff games, does this team need to go out and get and I'm not going to say bona fide ace because there aren't enough of those out there for one a team, but do they need at least a 1A? Like, do they need a head of this rotation, in your opinion?
I don't think they need it, but they would absolutely be, they would be smart to go out and get it, and be focused on that at the deadline. And
It'll
even
be
though,
expensive. Yeah.
it absolutely will. They'll probably look for someone with term, but they do have some interesting guys coming up. And they're
Hmm.
kind of getting to the point where you don't feel like, well, they'll never be able to compete with another team in terms of what prospects they can offer to make a trade for a guy like that. It's been a while since we've been able to say that. But I think we're kind of getting back towards that point. And part of it was, the deals that they made, the sell off last winter, or sort of last summer at the deadline, and just the internal improvements that they've had. And they got all these guys that are, coming back from their many Tommy John surgeries that are sort of entering the mix as well. So they're not as bereft of prospects, I think, as they have been over the last couple of years. But yeah, absolutely, they should do that. And I think you're right that the ceiling is an issue. Love Kevin Gausman. Love it when he when he's
When
at at
he's
his best,
on,
he can
yeah,
be that guy.
yeah.
But it's just the older you get, the farther it seems to be from him being that guy, and you will see it for a couple of weeks, like I think we just recently did,
Hmm.
where the
And then you
splitters
hit a
really
wall like
really
in
working.
Philadelphia, right?
Yeah.
So
Um, which happens to the greatest pitchers too, but
true.
it just does feel like it's one of those things where the peaks are fewer and farther between the older a guy gets, which is just what happens to everybody. Scherzer being back will be nice. I think you're right that I think I don't worry about, as much as I don't worry about the playoffs at all. I think it's kind of a crapshoot for the most part. You would rather have better pitching than what they currently do, I think, in terms of, the front of your rotation, but they can get there. I think those guys can win playoff games. Absolutely, I don't think the ace is necessary, but it does make your life a lot easier when you have a guy where you feel like you can go up against another team's best pitcher and not be like, all right, well, are we thinking about tomorrow already? Um, so and I don't know if that guy's going to be out there in terms of trade. Um, they're probably going to have to wait a little while before they produce one internally, though. Obviously, some impressive stuff this year, but yeah, it's a worry. I'm more worried about the back end of the rotation at the moment, but yeah,
You're not
longer
alone.
term, yeah. Oh man, what a disaster. But they've been working well with that too, which is pretty remarkable. But yeah, I don't no
What's your
nobody's
what
confusing them for a great rotation, right? Yeah.
what's your thoughts on Scherzer? If he does all right in Buffalo on Wednesday and he doesn't feel too sore, do you think they go any longer with building him up, or do you think we get him right back in Toronto?
They could go longer. I just feel because he's so, at the front of the process, and he knows more about his body and how it
Hmm.
responds. And if that's something that he thinks that he wants, then I could see them doing it. I think if it was up to, the most results driven, front office people, that he would probably be here by now
Hmm.
already.
Yeah, of
But I
course.
think that that's a process that they're being very cautious about and respecting, what he's telling them, and what he's trying to do and how his body responds to stuff. So maybe they won't. It can't go much longer with poor old Bowden Francis, unfortunately. Um, the Lauer thing is less concerning, which is itself a concern. If you've slipped behind Eric Lauer or Spencer Turnbull on the depth
Yeah.
chart, probably time to work some things out, not in the major leagues. But yeah, Scherzer will be a huge help, I would suspect. I think, I want to believe, entirely possible that he just doesn't have it, but it feels like when he's been healthy in the past couple of years, even with diminished stuff compared to his peak, he knows how to get batters out. He's done a nice job, and still just it was such a it was so bad, and so like just the way that it worked out, that he pitched only a couple innings. It's an exciting thing to have Max Scherzer pitch for the Toronto Blue Jays. Like that's
Yeah.
a bona fide Hall of Famer, who still can get guys out. Would have liked a full summer of that. But whatever we can get, especially, at the time when he went down, people are kind of thinking like, well, what are we even going to do here? Like, without like the playoffs were such a not a long shot necessarily, but nothing was guaranteed about this team being competitive when he went down, and you kind of thought, well, he's gonna come back for a couple starts, and the trade deadline's looming. You might not even see him. You might not get much out of that signing that was kind of exciting in its relative terms. But now he's coming back into a competitive environment. They're actually playing for something. So that I think is going to be really fun to watch. I am looking forward to it. I don't care for him. He's fun as a cheerleader to watch him. When he's in
Hmm.
the dugout. But yeah, it'll be much better to see him stalking around, getting irrationally upset about things when it actually matters.
It is impressive that, and I'm not gonna say they got there yet, but they have kind of bridged that gap between there not being any reinforcements pitching wise and them having some options to go to here. I know you mentioned Adam Macko a few minutes ago here. Obviously, they're lefty, most advanced lefty in the minors. He was the guy that, for everyone who forgets, that was the prospect that came along with Eric Swanson in the Teoscar trade, and he's finally healthy and back up at AAA. Spencer Turnbull is with the team now, and he's starting to ramp up, and we're starting to see velo start to slowly uptick there to where they want it to be. Alek Manoah is pitching off a mound. Max Scherzer is on the verge of return. I don't want to say they're out of the woods, but are you feeling a little more comfortable with where this depth is at when it comes to the starting pitching?
Yeah, I am absolutely. Yeah, all those names for sure. I don't know how much they're going to push like a Landon Marutis who's back on the mound
Mhm.
as well. Like those are kind of guys from the lower minors, but there's a route for someone like that to move up sort of quickly. I don't know that he's going to come in and save the Blue Jays season at the big league level, but there's another option in there, and I think that there's some other guys who are starting to get healthy who've been down for a while that could theoretically be options. So it's not like. And I've been harder on Spencer Turnbull than I probably should have been. He did well for the Phillies last year. There are things about him that are, while not exciting,
Yeah.
that can be useful.
Yes.
So there is that. I mean, maybe a stint in the minors for Bowden Francis helps him get somewhere. But it's mostly it's about Scherzer. I would say. I don't think we're going to see Trey Yesovich in the big leagues this year, even though that is that he is moving quickly. I'm not sure they're ready to push that so much. I think it was like 93 innings that he threw in college last
Hmm.
year. So that's or 2 years, last year, whatever it was. So that
Yeah,
is
and he's pushing 60 already. So for everyone
yeah.
listening, that's like, get your Savage up. He's almost, I mean, what, 20%, 30% increase? Like maybe 110 they'll try and push him two innings wise, maybe 120. Like you don't want to overdo it, right?
Yeah, I would think so. I think we haven't really seen yet, what some of the changes are, but I would suspect that we won't see him pushed as hard or, like Ricky Tiedemann was sort of in line for, well, but okay, maybe there's a bullpen opening at the end of the year. Maybe we'll be
Hmm.
able to build up some innings for him that way. I don't know if they want to put those kind of high stress innings on guys like that who don't have that, the build up in the previous seasons. So yeah, I'm not penciling him in any way. That would be an interesting story. Maybe the field, maybe whatever indicators they use, which I think, going back to the Jeff Hoffman thing, was a lot to do with like how the pitcher actually feels himself and relying on that rather than, maybe metrics of some sort of, though I'm sure those are in play as well. Maybe
I
maybe
actually
that
saw a
yes.
tweet from Keegan Matheson that actually like really summed up Trey Savage pretty well. And he was like, at the start of the year, I gave Trey a 0% chance of making his Major League Baseball debut, and I can no longer say that.
Yeah.
Like it's like I know we're both saying the same thing, Andrew, right? Like we're both like, there's no way this kid gets called up, but also like maybe a tiny little baby percentage in the bullpen at the end, maybe, but it's unlikely.
I think so. It doesn't feel like the Alec Manoah situation where they,
Yeah.
in 2020, he had been drafted, like he wasn't as close to his draft year. There was 2020, so we didn't really know what he pitched that year. But in
Yeah.
2021, he didn't, well, yes, it didn't also, dominate the Yankees in spring training and look like he belonged like from minute number one.
Yeah, that's
That
true.
whole Manoah trajectory was pretty
Was
wild, but
wild, man.
yeah, yeah. But similar
Speaking of Manoah, do
results.
you have any hope for Manoah contributing in 2025? I know it's a big ask coming off of injury, and then on top of that, the struggles he had before his surgery. But can you see him? And I'm not asking if we're going to
Yeah.
see 2021 Alec Manoah, but can we see a serviceable Alec Manoah in
I
2025?
I think so. I was pretty encouraged by, where he was at, after all of that, all the changes and that was such a shame when he went down and had to that progress was sort of stopped in its tracks. But there are definitely things there. We'll see. Sometimes guys come back with a little more velocity after
Hmm.
a Tommy John, and maybe it will have done him some good to have some time off of pitching, right? And that's you wouldn't be like, well, have a preventative Tommy John. Like obviously there was something wrong there
Yeah.
there in the arm, but I think that that it's an injury of like wear and tear. It doesn't. We kind of think of it as something like the ligament snaps, but it's not necessarily always like that. He got the internal brace, I'm pretty sure, which
Hmm.
which is a more means it didn't need to be fully repaired. It was just braced. So that would have been deteriorating for a while on him, and so maybe that had something to do with what we saw in terms of the problems that he had in 2023 or whatever, whichever year that was, and he did kind of go away from being a strikeout guy, which was a huge thing in 2021 and when he was coming up. The velocity I don't think dipped necessarily, but he seemed to be more focused on efficiency in terms of his pitch count. And while all well and good, it always felt to me like there was a little bit of something missing. I don't know that that's where, like, if he's going to go back to max effort stuff, but you could. I wouldn't be surprised if there was something going on the whole time. And we know that there was a shoulder thing, or there was the whole issue between the team and him about the demotion and how healthy he was. Like there was fatigue, or there was something going on. And I am a little bit hopeful that some time off and will be a helpful thing for him. I think he knows how to pitch. I think he's got weapons in that arsenal that he can use. It'll be very interesting to see, but I do think he can be useful, and I am looking forward to his return. He's a fun guy to have around as well, and that's maybe on the optimistic side of things, because there's not a lot of proof of concept of post, you know, what post terrible unrosterable Alek Manoah. We haven't seen a ton of that to really believe that he became a new guy or he figured it out finally before the injury. But I am hopeful about it. I think that there are reasons to not just completely write him off at the very least.
Andrew, I could sit and talk baseball with you all day, my man. Thank you so much for taking the time. Before I let you go here, I got one more question for you,
Mhm.
and it is about John Schneider. I know that sometimes a fan base doesn't like their manager. And when I say sometimes, I mean basically every fan base ever throughout the history of time
Yeah.
can tear apart their manager. Hall of Fame managers got tore apart by their fan base. So obviously John Schneider has similar things going on with the fan base here, and he's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I know that there's a few times I could just off the top of my head pick some bad moves that he has made. All in all, though, what is your opinion of John Schneider? And he's this team's manager until the end of this year for sure. Would you feel comfortable saying that?
I would feel comfortable saying that. Yeah, I like John Schneider as much as I can find reason to like him. Like it's such a difficult position to analyze, right?
Yeah.
We don't know what goes into a lot of these decisions. We don't know who's feeling something that day, or what their internal metrics are saying about particular matchups and stuff. It's really really difficult. And I go back to Gibby, who everybody hated, and then guess what? They go to the playoffs. They have a good team, and now Gibby's the greatest manager. And it's not quite that like literal, but like people hated John
Yeah.
Gibbons for years. Couldn't believe that they brought him back. And when he exited, he was Saint Gibby, and still is. And it's like the reason that attitude changed towards him wasn't because he started using his bullpen differently. It's because they won games, and it's just that's what the manager discourse is, right? That's all that it is. So I have no problem with John Schneider, and I think they really like him. And going back to what we talked about earlier about valuing stability, I thought the hot seat stuff was probably premature
Yeah.
early on, and now I'm very comfortable saying I don't think that that's a change they're going to make.
Andrew Stoughton, check out his podcast, Blue Jays Happy Hour, as well on Substack. You can check out his newsletter, The Bat Flip. If you're not reading it, you sure should. It is, honestly, dude, I love it. I
Oh,
wait for
thank
it to come out every time. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us, my man. And I look forward to the next time I twist your arm to come back.
Yeah, anytime, man. Thanks so much. Always great to chat ball.